Okay, we're on Eruvin, Perek Bet Mishnah Hey. So in our last Mishnah, we talked about the idea of, two Mishnah ago, we talked about the idea of Beit Sa'atayim for ginah ula karpaf. Beit Sa'atayim, we learned, was the amount of area required in order to plant two sa'ah. So how much is that? So we've learned before, I'm going to have a calculator here, I'm going to see for a reason, that the area was the area of the Chatzer of the Mishkan, which was 50 amot by 100 amot, which equals 5,000 square amot. Now, when you take those 5,000 square amot and you take the square root of them, you get 70.71, about 70 and 5/7 amot. If you made a square of 70.71 times 70.71, you would get exactly 5,000. So the question we're going to have to ask is, and it's like sort of an esoteric question in the Mishnah, how close to the 70.71 can you get? How much of a Beit Sa'atayim can you have and still consider that an enclosure? Says the Mishnah, V'od Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, said Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, Haginah v'hakarpaf. We learned that the ginah and the karpaf, that's exactly the term that we learned. The ginah was like a garden that they used. It wasn't an area that people lived in, but it was like a flower garden. It was an area outside of the city that people planted in. And the karpaf, we learned, the karpaf was an area that was an enclosure. See, the way they describe it, they write it in this Kol HaLashon picture. It's outside the city, used to store different kinds of wood or whatever. People didn't live there. So if there's Shehin Shivim Amah V'Shirayim, Al Shivim Amah V'Shirayim. So remember we said that Shivim Amah V'Shirayim is 70 plus, because 70 times itself is 4,900. So if I make that 70 and 2/3, and I multiply that times itself, then I get 4993. We're going to see that's an important number. So if it's 70 plus on 70 plus, then mukefet gader gavoa asarat tfachim. If it's surrounded by a fence that's 10 tfachim high, metaltalim betocha, you can carry in it. Ubilvad sheheba shomera or beitira. As long as there's like a guardhouse or a beitira. I mean, somebody, for whatever reason, somebody decided to put an area like a guardhouse in it, and somebody lives. Because the whole point of enclosures is, the whole point of my being able to carry something is that if the enclosure, let's go back to the karpaf, the enclosure is used, why should I be able to carry in it? I mean, it's a very fancy enclosure here, but why should I be able to carry in it? It's because it's made for human use. But if it's not made for human use, then even the enclosure shouldn't help. So therefore, if it has a beit shomera, a guardhouse, or a beit dira, or a little apartment, or it would be close to the city. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Afilu ein ba ela bor v'siach umara." Even if it only had a pit, a well, or a siach, a cave. A siach is a crevice, or a me'ara, or a cave. Metaltalim betocha. Even if it only had one of those things, it didn't have to have a guardhouse. It doesn't have to have an apartment, as long as there's some human use. Rabbi Akiva says, "Afilu." Let me move the page up. Afilu ein ba achat mikol eila. Even if it has none of those things, metaltalim betocha, you can carry in it. Ubevad sheheba shivim ama v'shirayim, al shivim ama v'shirayim. As long as it's 70 amot v'shirayim on 70 amot v'shirayim. So now you'll ask yourself, we just said shivim ama v'shirayim on shivim ama v'shirayim. So what's the difference between Rabbi Akiva, who says 70 plus, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, who says 70 plus? So I'm just going to show you. There's a really long essay in the Bartanura. You're welcome to go read it if you want. But the Kahati boils it down and says, essentially the machloket is, according to Rabbi Akiva, if I took 5,000 and took the square root, if I went all the way up to 70.7, meaning the shira v'shirayim, if I went all the way up to exactly 70.71 times 70.71, then it would be exactly Beit Sa'atayim. Rabbi Akiva says, no, it can't be Beit Sa'atayim. It has to be shivim amma v'shirayim, i.e., it has to be 70 point, it's hard to do the point with the mouse, 70.666. Then I do the square of that, I only get to 4993. It can't be more than 70 and 2/3 amah. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba says, no, it can be up to and including exactly 5,000 square amot. Why that's such a fundamental machloket, I've got to be honest with you. I don't know exactly. I'm not entirely sure. You have to read the long essay in the Bartanura to understand exactly why this and not something else. Read on the Mishnah. If you want to go delve in deeper, you should read the Kahati or look for other explanations on your own. I think that's enough to go into it. The Mishnah continues. Okay. Rabbi Lezer says, this ginah or karpaf that you surrounded, that's up to Beit Sa'atayim, it has to be exactly square. if it was longer, more than its width, even 1 amah, you can't carry in it. Rabbi Yossi says, afilu orka pishnayim birochba, metaltalim betocha. Even if its length is double the width, you're still allowed to be metaltel. Rabbi Yossi says you're certainly allowed to, even if it's a rectangle. Now you'll ask yourself, the Kahati asks, and the Gemara talks about, well, what's the difference between the Tanakama, who says it doesn't have to be square, and Rabbi Yossi, who says even if it can be pishnayim birachba. So the Kahati explains that according to Rashi, is the lechatchila have to be a ribua, or b'di'evet it's okay, meaning square, and b'di'evet it's okay if it's a rectangle, or even the lechatchila can be a rectangle. That's the difference between the two opinions. The Bartenura at the end of the long essay says, be paskin like Rabbi Yossi, v'lo b'ayim meruvot, it doesn't have to be exactly square, but rather if you enclose your ginah and karpaf, that's exactly up to a beit sa'atayim, and but a little less than a beit sa'atayim, it can even be a rectangle, and that should be a relief to all of us. We'll stop here. It's a relatively complicated Mishnah. I hope I explained it to the best of my ability. I don't want to go too much deeper into it. I think that's enough. If you have any comments or questions, email me at spolter@gmail.com. And we'll dedicate our learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a good day.